My girlfriend got me turned on to this app the kids use called TikTok, and on there I always see these lists ranking the Star Wars movies. The lists all having two things in common. They're usually terrible, and they always have Revenge of the Sith as the top-rated movie with Empire Strikes Back as an obligatory second place. Look, like what you like, but these kids always say they're going 12 for 12 on their ranks, then proceed to rank George's 6 films, the sequel trilogy, and the Disney spin-offs, as well as the Clone Wars animated movie. And it got me wondering why no one goes 14 for 14, since there are two movies starring Ewoks that everyone may or may not have totally forgotten about. I think part of it may be that these movies are no longer canon to the modern Star Wars universe, being classified as legends, which these same TikTokers claim were never canon, something that isn't really true. George did say that there are his movies, then everything else is kind of its own thing. That is true, but George also disowns the sequel trilogy on TV while being interviewed about The Force Awakens in 2015.
They decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine. But basically, I'm not going to try to... They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway, but at the same time I said, I'm not going to... If I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do, so... And I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all I would do is muck everything up.
I heard people make the counter-argument that he sold it to Disney, so Disney chooses the canon, and if that's the case, I'm still right, because each Essentials Legends novel mentions the extended universe. Now Legends is the old canon before Disney rebooted. Basically, I'm right. Anyhow, we are here looking at Ewok's Caravan of Courage, a film that was arbitrarily said to have taken place in 3 ABY between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, though that makes no sense since we see the Ewoks living amongst humans, and in Return of the Jedi they're trying to eat humans. Also during 3 ABY, I believe the Imperials would have already been occupying Endor. George's original thought when he was developing these, though, is that these took place in the far-off future, but the issue there is that A, Wicket from Return of the Jedi is in this film, and B, the novel The Tyrant's Test, that takes place in 17 ABY, sees Sindel show up as a grown woman and reporter, meaning this has to have taken place within the vicinity of the original trilogy, with Leland Chee figuring that since Sindel was 5 in this film and the forest isn't trashed from the Battle of Endor, this movie must take place between Empire and Return of the Jedi in 3 ABY. Honestly, though, I put weeks of research and thought into this and reject his theory. Not to mention the Ewoks speak Basic in this, which is Star Wars' main language, which explains why most of the beings speak in a tongue the other people around them understand, and also we as the audience understand.
We came on a Star Cruiser and we crashed.
We crashed? Star Cruiser?
It was offered that Sindel and Mace didn't speak Basic in this film, and rather that they spoke a different language that was merely recorded in a way that viewers could understand, though this theory makes no sense, since a HoloNet broadcast in Legacy of the Force Fury is showing a story on Ewoks that spoke Basic to little girls, referencing this film. Meaning, I don't know. Honestly, you basically gotta go headcanon with this one. There's no clear indication of official timeline placement, and there's no way to place this that isn't a little bit sloppy. Either way, you gotta rationalize it how you will. So I'm decreeing that I think it takes place in 5 ABY, and for the purposes of my Star Wars playlist and this video, we're rolling with that. Following the conclusion of the Star Wars trilogy, George Lucas again became interested in the medium of television, following his first failed attempt through the Star Wars Holiday Special.
There it is. A pocket-sized aquarium. Wonderful, isn't it?
Like the wider films, George Lucas was involved in the project through a story lens, coming up with concepts that were refined by Bob Carew, who would put together a proper screenplay. Though the project started as a 30-minute short film, TV producers requested that George have the project expanded to a 97-minute film to facilitate it taking up a 2-hour television time slot given the rise in popularity of the television film in the 1980s. John Cordy would be hired as the director, and the film was shot in the Redwoods of California. John Corey, known for a vast number of films, both narrative and documentary, but also having a large catalog of television films under his belt, proving to be the man George would trust with this project. He would direct his last project in 2011 and passed away fairly recently in 2022, though this would be his most famous project since most of his career fell into relative obscurity, being smaller films throughout the years. The film utilized heavy stop-motion techniques, which wasn't used very much on Star Wars proper, but due to a restrictive budget was needed for this film. Of course, you also had Ewok suit actors, including Warwick Davis, who returned from Return of the Jedi as Wicket. Eric Walker, who played Mace, and Warwick Davis were both teens during the production of this film, and to inspire the duo to expand their career in film, George offered the duo's cameras to shoot behind-the-scenes footage for this film.
He's a very good basketball player. Next week he's going to whip the pants off Tony.
I really don't wear pants.
Naturally, since this was a TV movie, none of that would see the light of day until Walker would release it on his YouTube channel in 2014. The lead is named Mace in this film, which notably was the name of the lead in George Lucas's first draft for Star Wars at the time, called Journal of the Whills Part 1. That screenplay would be thoroughly rewritten, but the lead was named Mace Windu, something that this film chose to homage with its lead, and more obviously would be homaged down the line when George Lucas created the character Mace Windu for the Star Wars prequel films. Finally, on November 25th of 1984, this would be released on the ABC TV network. The story follows Mace Tawani and his family on Endor after their ship crash lands. Mace and his sister Sindel being separated from their parents, Jeremit and Katarin, who are attacked and taken by a Gorax, a fierce and giant Endor monster. Eventually, the kids are found by Ewoks and taken to the Ewok village, with the kids being embraced by the Ewoks after everyone realizes that the kids are pretty chill.
We need some more medicine.
Who's cheeks?
We need more medicine. We need more of this.
The children try heading off to find their parents, but after being attacked by a boar wolf, realize that that won't be happening on their own. After returning to the village shaman Logray shows them the way to their parents using his magical crystal spinner.
Be careful with that.
Mace and Sindel recruit some Ewok companions, so much like the Lord of the Rings, a caravan is formed, a caravan of courage, you might say. Deej, Weechi, and Wicket are selected, though Chuka Torque comes along for shits and giggles later on. Eventually they pick up a stray Wisty named Izanra. Basically, these are like fairies from Zelda or whatever, the little talking fairies.
Maybe she's lost from her family.
Like us, all our families are split up.
Eventually, they make it to the Forbidden Forest of the Gorax, where they fight spiders, and eventually the Gorax themselves, freeing Mace's family by the cast of Chunka, who gives Mace his ceremonial battle axe to remember him by.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Anyhow, these fantasy elements are what really intrigued George Lucas in his potential sequel trilogy he planned on making, with him going to lean into these elements. So any aspiring TikTok Star Wars tubers should really watch these before complaining that Lucas had all the good ideas. Our main players in this film are Mace and Sindel and their pack of Ewok friends. Mace is the lead of this film and is sad that his family's gone, but with the loss of his parents, he has to embrace a hero's journey to save them. Mace is definitely a kid at first and is scared and sad, but eventually embraces the adventure with his Ewok companions and pals, learning to be brave while also looking out for his little sister. Look, it's not that deep honestly, but it's not a horrible arc. I can actually appreciate what they went with for him, and for a relatively breakneck film with lots of ground to cover, I will dare to say that Mace is actually fine, even if his character has some limits, being just some kid basically. Sindel is the little sister of Mace, who's also sad and scared, but also does a good job connecting with the Ewoks and convincing her older brother of the worth the Ewoks can offer their mission to save their parents. She's a pretty functional character in this film though, and as we will soon cover, she's the full lead of the sequel. Jeremy and Katarin are their parents and fill the damsel role as the kids try fighting off the Gorax monster with help from their brave caravan of Ewok pals.
Must be a way up there somehow.
I think the Ewoks are interesting as well in this film since they have a culture and a real ritual system, an honor system, and are brave despite their small stature, which is pulled from and expanded upon from their relatively recent appearance in Return of the Jedi a couple years back. Tonally, this film is a fantasy adventure and as a result is designed to be fun, though with the restrictions of TV, ends up being a bit weird and boring at times. Unlike the other Star Wars films, this film is very much fantasy over sci-fi, and honestly could have been a film taking place in a fantasy land separate from Star Wars with little consequences other than losing some of the Star Wars terminology and technology and the Ewok species itself. The music was done by composer Peter Bernstein with cues from John Williams' Parade of the Ewoks score from Return of the Jedi. Honestly, this is some of the worst music in Star Wars. It's not an ear sore or anything, it's just really bland and doesn't have enough to it, though I suspect much like a lot of this film, that kind of comes down to the low budget and small amount of time they had to make this thing. The editing by John Nutt works well, but obviously given that this is a TV movie, it gets occasionally weird when the movie really obviously does a TV movie commercial break cut, which happens now and again. The stop motion effects are probably the best part of the film for me. I love stop motion, Ray Harryhausen being an icon in my eyes, who revolutionized the armature stop motion technique which was used on the Gorax. It doesn't have as many frames as it could, that's for sure. It's a little bit choppy, but for a TV movie, it actually looks pretty good and is probably my favorite part of this movie. Director John Cordy also shot the film and it looks good if a bit plain most of the time. Again though, on a TV movie, you're trying to work within the tight timeline and tighter budget, so for what it is, it's fine, but not spectacular. It's kind of worth noting that Ewoks are pretty contentious when it comes to people's enjoyment of Return of the Jedi. I think they're fine though. I grew up with the original trilogy on VHS, so Ewoks were always there, making me a bit less bothered than people back in the day who were sitting in theaters when an army of teddy bears pull up to save the day. It's kind of like that movie Batman and Robin. Like, I kind of love that movie, but like if I was in the theaters in 1998, I would absolutely hate it.
And took the liberty to create something in your size.
Suit me up, Uncle Alfred.
I can tell you now, if you hate Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, this film won't change your opinion on them, and this film with its slow pace and fantasy elements can be occasionally immensely boring, especially when put against the backdrop of the other Star Wars films. This film has a narrator as well, which is pretty weird for a Star Wars project.
In an Ewok village on the moon of Endor, Deej tries to summon two of his sons.
Only added to the fact that our Ewok village feels a bit like someone's backyard. I don't know, just looks sort of cheap at times. The film includes repeated sequences of hang gliding to go along with our real-world animals like horses, ferrets, owls, llamas, and more. I guess out of any planet in Star Wars, the forest moon of Endor must be the most similar to Earth, and more specifically the California redwoods. Ewoks speaking English is weird, but after the holiday special blunder where like a third of the movie was just Wookiees speaking in Treewook or Wookiee tongue, I can see why this was chosen, to try to make the film less annoying. I just can't believe no one chose to add subtitles to that film. The Gorax layer looks good and like shit. I can't really decide, honestly. I think I like it because the rest of the film looks boring, but I'm not sure. Please sound off in the comments if you think I'm just looking for something positive to say or if it's actually impressive to look at. Okay, the giant spider scene felt kind of like a ghetto version of The Hobbit, which was kind of fun too. In conclusion, Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure is far more interesting to ponder and talk about than to actually watch. It's really boring. It's also just not something that has been acknowledged much in the Star Wars universe, despite George Lucas being pretty closely involved in the production, which is likely why this film kind of ended up forgotten. I honestly learned about this film exclusively since my neighbor growing up had a copy of this DVD, which by the way was the only way to officially watch the film in the DVD era until just a couple years ago, and the VHSs are actually kind of hard to come by. Disney Plus uploaded the film too eventually. Not sure if they still have the film up, but for a time it was up at least. Honestly, back in the day when I did full Star Wars marathons, I always dreaded watching this one, and honestly I still do. I think it's too bad, since I think in theory this could have launched a slew of Star Wars spin-offs in the original trilogy era before Star Wars was hyper-defined the way it is today, and could have taken different angles like this fantasy angle. I'm imagining like a Droids TV film or a Tusken Raiders show, Gamorrean Guard show, I don't know, whatever. There was potential. So next time you want to rank Star Wars on TikTok, remember to include this film in its sequel, or you'll be a fake fan and a Disney shill.